What is it like being a Jamaican in Saipan? Hi, I'm Xavier Murphy, the founder of Jamaicans.com. And today in Jamaicans to the World, I talk to Walt Goodridge, a Jamaican living in Saipan. Welcome, Walt. How are you?
I'm fine. Thanks, Xavier, for having me. Very honored to be here.
Good, good. You and I go a ways back. You have traveled. I've followed some of your travels, and it's just great having you on to tell your story. So, first question: which
Okay.
part of Jamaica you come from?
All right. I was born in St. Joseph's Hospital in Kingston, Jamaica. I grew up in Hugh and Then Housing Scheme on Marathon Drive. I'm getting as specific as I can for people who might not believe it. Like, so Kingston, Jamaica. But let me just say one thing. Some of my fondest memories, though, are spending time with my grandmother and grandfather, helping them raise chickens, feed the pigs, milk the cows in Old Harbor in St. Catherine. So I like to consider myself a country boy as opposed to a city boy.
All right, man, trying to rep the country. Make sure everybody know him have some country rep in there. Did you attend high school in Jamaica?
No, unfortunately not. I left just at the point where I was taking the common entrance, so I never got a chance to go to probably Calabar. I would have gone to, but no, that's one of my regrets is that I never got to develop those friendships in high school.
All right, no problem. All right, shout out. Your preference was Calabar. I thought you were gonna say the Great Jamaica College, but I will leave that one alone.
Calabar was close. Calabar was close to where we live in here and then. And my brother went there. He's older than I was. He went there, so I probably would have ended up going to Calabar as well.
Good, good, good. So let's get into how did you end up? And again, you have a backstory that is just so amazing. But how did you end up in Saipan?
All right. So I spent most of my adult life in America, in New York primarily, and a little bit of time in Maryland. But in 2005, I had already quit my job as a civil engineer, and I was living in Harlem at the time, up on 119th Street. And a friend of mine who I had been involved in some music industry ventures before, he came to visit from Las Vegas, and we were at a party in Brooklyn, and he told me about his trip to Saipan. He had gone to Japan to help some producers there, and they took him to Saipan because Saipan is a frequent vacation spot for people in Japan. So that night in Brooklyn in December of 2005, we were just sitting talking, and he was telling me all of this great stuff about Saipan. The girls are pretty, the weather is great, it's really friendly atmosphere, and something, I mean, he must have sold it the right way, but something clicked. And on that night, I had never heard about Saipan before until that night, but I decided I needed to go there. So by 2 months later, by February 23rd of 2006, I was on a one-way flight to Saipan, just based on how he sold. And it's
That
been the best move I ever made in my life.
that is amazing because I'll tell you this, until you and I had connected like a few years ago, never heard of Saipan before.
Right.
You know, it's one of the places that I always keep thinking I have to look on the map. And I know it is, I believe, a territory of the United States, but
Yes, it's
it is closer to, is it Australia or is it
yeah.
Greenland? Or I mean, I'm sorry,
No,
Australia, I believe.
closer to
Both.
Australia, closer to Guam, closer to Japan, closer to the Philippines. It's about 8,000 miles. It's in the Western Pacific, and it's part of a 14 island chain. That's actually, technically, it's a commonwealth. So it's called the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and Saipan and Tinian and Rota are the three populated islands of that chain. So we refer to it as the CNMI, Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, CNMI, and Saipan is the main, most populated, most developed island.
Okay.
So yes, technically it's the Commonwealth, but I'll just say territory, so we don't muddy the waters too much.
So it's a popular vacation spot, you said, for the people around what, Europeans, Asians.
Asian.
Um, okay, okay.
So
Very interesting.
we have a
Go
lot of Koreans coming to visit. In fact, we're just about to set up a travel bubble between Saipan and Korea. They constitute right now the largest population of tourists. So Korea, Japan, um, some from the US, but not much. Most of the tourists to Saipan are Japanese and Korean, and Chinese.
ahead.
Chinese was growing as well.
So tell me a little bit about the people. I mean, what are the people of Saipan like?
All right. So now I give tours of the island. Since I've come here, I've learned so much about the island. I actually give tours. So you'll have to stop me if some of my information gets too detailed for the for the average person. But there's an indigenous population of in Chamorro and Carolinians. So they comprise the indigenous population, but they're actually in the minority because the population right now, Saipan, is 48,000 people, and most of those are Filipinos who come here to work. We have Japanese, we have Koreans, we have Bangladeshis, we have Chinese, we have some American mainlanders, and at least one Jamaican.
Well, let me stop you there for a minute. 48 thousand people, you said?
Yeah, it's a
How
small.
big?
You know, Xavier, there are more people in Co-op City in the Bronx, in that housing establishment in the Bronx, than there are on Saipan. The census was 55,000 people total in the whole CNMI, and 48,000 on Saipan, about 4,000 on Tinian, and about 3,000 or less on Rota. So combined, it's about 55,000. The island itself is only 13 miles by 5 miles. You can drive from one end of the island to the other in less than half an hour, in about 25 minutes. So
okay, are there, and I know I'm just being facetious here, but
okay.
are there a lot of cars there? You don't really need a car.
Actually, because of the layout, because of the topography, you do need a car to get to some of the best spots, some of the mountainous spots. But and the funny thing is, very few people here actually walk. Most people here have cars. So yeah, there are about what figure did I hear? I heard there are about as, I think it was half as many cars. So I think there were like 20,000 cars on the island. I could be mistaken, but it was everyone has a car. Very few people actually ride bicycles or
Wow. So I interrupted, and I'm so sorry. You're giving kind of a breakdown of the people and the makeup. You talked about the indigenous people, and you talked about Filipinos and some other people. So my bad. I interrupted you. Continue telling us about the people there in Saipan.
So it's a very unique place, very, very unique. You, in one little 13-mile long island, as I said, you have Chamorros, you have Carolinians, you have other Pacific Islanders from Chuuk and Yap and Palau. You have, as I mentioned, Koreans, Japanese, Filipinos, and a lot of the Filipinos came here to work, in the tourism industry, most of the tourism industry. So the majority of the workers in the tourism industry are actually Filipino, and you have Japanese and you have some Korean. The island itself, these islands were controlled originally, obviously, by the indigenous population, but then Spain colonized the island, and then Germany for a few years, and then Japan right after World War I, and then the US took the island from Japan during World War II. So there's influence here from Pacific Island, there's influence here from Germany, from Japan. In the language, I mean, we have Pacific Islanders with the last name Hofschneider, living on Tinian. So it's really fascinating place. So your neighbor to your left can be Filipino, your neighbor to your right can be Japanese. It's really fascinating place.
Oh man, that's amazing. So, we talk about like a Jamaica or, and some of the other Caribbean islands where there's a melting or mixture of cultures and languages. Right. It seems like that is what you have going on there in terms of, just because of the many cultures there. Is there a mixture of languages, or is there English is the probably, I don't know, it may be the
Right.
official, and then
English
there's
is the
all these
language.
others.
Right. English is the official language. And just for the record, just so people know, people here on Saipan are actually U.S. citizens. They originally, were Japanese, and then they established a relationship with the United States. So on November 3rd, 1986, the day before the covenant with the United States took effect, everyone here was a local, as we say. And then you woke up on November 4th, 1986, and you are a U.S. citizen. So everyone who's born here since then is a U.S. citizen. So they can travel freely, from here to the mainland.
So I mean, I know you weren't there in 1987, but
Right.
was there some type of referendum or something, and were there folks that were like, I don't know if I want to do this? And, and you probably got some of the tail end because you were there, I think you said 2005, thereabouts. But do you know if there was some tension making that jump over?
Absolutely. Very interesting question. So Saipan and Palau and some of the other Pacific Islands were part of a group that voted as to whether they wanted to establish a more a closer relationship with the United States. And Palau, as people probably know, is an independent country. So they opted out. They decided not to. Here on Saipan, from what I've read and from what I understand, it was probably more like a 75-25 split. There was still about a quarter of the population who didn't want to establish a relationship with the United States. And even today, there are still people who are talking about separating from the United States and following Palau's route. But I doubt if that's going to happen, only because the majority of people would probably be opposed to it. There is some advantage to being connected to the U.S.
Indeed. So the language you were saying, English is the official, but
Right.
there is probably some indigenous languages that are there.
Yes, but it's not actually taught in the schools. So Chamorro is not taught in the schools. Carolinian isn't taught in the schools. I just read something in a local paper that they're making moves to do that. But currently, if you are born into a Chamorro family, you'd probably learn the language from your parents and from your grandparents. So people here who are what we call locals, the locals who speak Chamorro or Refalawash, which is the language of the Carolinian people, amongst themselves. But it's not, and it's technically an unofficial language as well. But the signs, the textbooks, the schooling system is all based on English.
How did they? And I know I'm getting a little deep, but you seem to, based on what I know and what you write and some of the stuff, you're ingrained. You know the stuff. So how have they preserved the language? It's not written. It's not. Is it just like
Right.
in Jamaica, passed down orally? Is that what's mainly going on, or is there specific keepers of the history, keepers of the language, or English spoken at school and then the language is spoken at home?
The language is spoken at home, and unfortunately, as I mentioned, it's not taught officially in the schools. So you have to really search hard. There are some independent authors who have created books, but I'll give you an interesting tidbit. If you look up the world's endangered languages on Wikipedia, for example, or on the internet, you'll find Refalawash as one of the world's endangered languages. It's in the danger of disappearing completely because only 3,000 people worldwide speak Refalawash, and I would imagine 2,900 of them are here on Saipan. And it's not officially recorded anywhere. So I mean, I understand there's books and there might be a CD, but there is a indigenous organization that is looking into preserving the culture and the language more officially so that it doesn't disappear.
Okay. Now, going off of that point, is there some customs that are tied to these indigenous folks that you found interesting? Maybe one or two that you could tell us about that you found really interesting when you get there. I've heard wedding customs in other interviews I've heard, and so pick one or two of the most interesting that you have found, with maybe the indigenous people, maybe a custom that right across the board, right,
Right.
whether they're indigenous or not, you find there in Saipan.
Okay. Um, there is a place on the island called, or just off the island called Forbidden Island. And as I mentioned, I do tours, so I've taken people there. And over the years, I've learned a few things about Forbidden Island. Beautiful spot. And the local story is that the spirits of the Tautomani, which is a Chamorro word for the ancestors, the spirits of the Tautomani inhabit Forbidden Island. So you have to ask for permission before you actually set foot on the island, or bad things can happen to you. If you are out in the near Forbidden Island, for example, you're not encouraged to scream or shout or make loud noises or remove things from the island, because if you do, some bad things can happen to you. And oddly enough, over the years, there have been some stories of people who have gotten washed out to sea when they've gone to, rogue waves have come and washed people out to sea. There have been some tragedies of families that have, tourists who have died, and families that have been split up because a member, got washed out to sea. So as superstitious as it might sound to some people, there's always a bit of truth to some of the things that you hear, that seem a bit unbelievable. So that's one thing that comes to mind, just in terms of how you need to comport yourself when you're in nature, and specifically in certain parts of the island that are considered sacred.
So what do you? Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No. So what do I want?
So what do you do to get the permission to go to this particular island? Do you do something there at Saipan before you go over there, or you get there and you do something there to get the permission?
All right, that's a very good question. Now, because I'm not Chamorro, maybe that's why no one has actually told me exactly what I should do, or if there's a specific protocol that I need to follow. But I'll tell you this: when you see the photo of Forbidden Island, you'll see that it's actually somewhat separated from the main island. So to actually get to Forbidden Island, you actually have to cross a little bit of water, which could actually be dangerous, and that's where people have gotten washed out to sea. So I have never actually foot on the island. The way I give my tours, I can approach it in such a way that you can see the amazing vista and take photos and go up close to it, but I've never actually set foot on the island itself. So that maybe that's why I'm still here, because I'm
don't make them up to get you, my friend.
So, I don't know if there's a specific protocol or way you have to ask,
right?
But I've just told you have to ask permission. It might be just acknowledging that you're about to enter the island.
Okay, but, all right.
If anyone watching this is Chamorro and would like to share what the specific protocol is, please.
Yes, please put it in the comments and let us know what that's. How.
Right.
So I'm gonna go off the ranch a little bit, because and I've been doing that lately, where I mix up the questions a little bit. And I know you're a single man. You're there, and Jamaican. You're black. What is it like? You've been there. What's what's the customs? What's the dating scene like for you? And what's that? Tell us about that particular experience.
All right. Now, as I mentioned, one of the things that my friend Ken, who introduced me to Saipan, one of the things that he mentioned was just how friendly the girls were in general, and great time that he had. Now, when I came to Saipan, I even had a date before I got here. Some of them.
Wait. You had a date before you got here? He already found you a date before you actually arrived?
My friend, a girl that he had interacted with, actually connected me to a girl. So before I even landed, I had a date set up with someone before I got here. But anyway, I'm going to make a general statement. in general, in the Asia Pacific region, in China, in Vietnam, in Thailand, in Singapore, everywhere that I've been, and I spent 6 months in China, went there multiple times. Everywhere that I've been, the dating scene in these countries is much different, and that's right, better than in the States, than in the mainland. The guys who have come here have all said the same thing. So I could tell you stories. I don't know how deep you
No,
want to get into.
this is a PG. This is a PG show.
Oh no. It's all PG. It's all G actually. But I'll just say this.
This is
so
a
much
G.
easier.
But
One of the things that
go ahead.
one of the
Go ahead,
things
Walt.
that's so frustrating. I don't know. Other guys seem to have a easier time, but for me, one of the most frustrating things about just connecting with people and dating was in the States. I was never comfortable there. It never flowed naturally. It was always a struggle. It was always, you have to prove yourself. You're by default, you're considered a creep, just for showing an interest in someone. So for me, it was always a very difficult thing to engage with people. Once I came here, however, and once I traveled to China specifically, other countries, it's just so much more natural. One of the things that we say is that, guys are able to be guys and girls are able to be girls. Girls don't actually mind guys showing interest in them. So you'll tell a girl she's pretty and she'll giggle, and it's just such a natural thing. You don't feel like it's not a combative adversarial relationship interacting. So much I could never go back to living in New York after experiencing. And a lot of guys who have come here have said the same thing. They come and they end up marrying locals, or they marry Chinese or Filipino or Japanese, just because the whole dating scene, the whole male-female interaction is just so much more natural and comfortable than it is for some of us in the States.
Okay. All right. And
you can probe. I'm not being evasive or anything, so you can probe.
No. I am going to dig a little deeper. So
let me say something, because this is actually a topic I don't talk about this a lot on my channel, or when I do my health channel or my business channel, because it's just not something I have to keep those identities separate. But on yours, I'll mention it. I spent 6 months in China, and I'll just explain to you how easy it is. I'm walking through the streets of China. I've been to Beijing, Kunming, Hainan, Xishuangban, and I'll just be walking through the streets of, there was a town called Xishuangban, and a girl just comes right up to me and says, "Hi, can I be your friend?" It's just like that. I'm walking through the streets, and the girl sees me on her bicycle. She turns around immediately and just starts following me. We end up spending the whole day together, just barely speaking, because she can't speak English. I don't speak Mandarin that well. But it's just so.
You have WeChat now. You have WeChat. It translates. Right? That makes it much easier.
When I went to Vietnam, I have a video on my channel of a Vietnamese girl who comes and picks me up when I'm in a park in Vietnam, and we ended up talking back and forth using Google Translate or Say Hi. Or those
technology.
So really cool. Yeah, really cool.
Let me ask you this. Now, I'm going to get to the Jamaican part, but obviously the first thing folks see is you're black.
Right.
And I know when I traveled to China some years ago, it's people are curious.
Yes.
And so you've lived in this culture, and you've interacted with the folks. What's your thoughts on the curiosity? Have you gotten used to that well, where you are now, probably everybody knows, it's not a big, they probably know who you are, but initially, what was the response of this Jamaican gentleman and this black gentleman that now lives on our island? What was the early response, and how was those interactions? And not all, just give me an example. I mean, you're gonna have multiple, I'm sure.
Um, Now it's funny because some of the experiences that I will talk about actually happened in Vietnam or China, which is different from Saipan. But I'll say this: one of the things that it's difficult for people to, especially if they live in the States, one of the things that people automatically assume, especially if they've lived in the States, is that there's an adversarial bias or prejudice perception of Blacks in Asia. And from my experience, that is absolutely not true. You have to keep in mind that it may be a little different now as more American media infiltrates a lot of other countries, but for the most part, most other countries are not um, being brainwashed into seeing themselves as different, or seeing Blacks a certain way. So I find that when I interact with people in China, and this was even the case when I was in New York and I would go to Chinatown, the interaction with people in China is just very natural. You just get the sense that, it's one human talking to another human. That feeling that you get that people are looking at you because you're different, or they might be looking down on you, or that they are secretly harboring bad thoughts. That's all stuff that you bring because of your indoctrination living in the States. I'm speaking specifically to people who live in the States, and from people who may have brought their own biases to how they depict Chinese. But from my experience, the other thing to keep in mind is that, uh, most people living outside of the US actually have a very positive, in my experience, a positive impression, not only of Blacks, but also of Jamaicans. So think about this for a second. They're going to see,
That's where I was going to go next. The
they see
Jamaican piece to it. When
right,
they
they're going to
when they
sports
find out you're Jamaican,
right.
that interaction.
They're going to see sports figures. They see hip hoppers. So they're very fascinated, and they don't normally see, Jamaicans walking the streets of Beijing. So people are fascinated in a positive way. So when I tell people, for example, that I'm from Jamaica, they immediately go, "Oh," and they start running in place because, to indicate that they know that Usain Bolt is, is Jamaican.
Fastest man.
So when I show my passport, to the customs agents or immigration agents, I get a look, I get, that fascination that they've rarely seen a Jamaican passport before. So, you know, and another thing I'll mention is, a lot of times when you read travel guides, when you read the books, when I first discovered Saipan, I went to the bookstore and I looked in some travel guides, and the perception of that people had wasn't very positive. But you have to keep in mind, and I'll just say it this way, you have to keep in mind who is writing the travel guides. All right? And the perception that they get will, for the most part, be how they are perceived and how they are treated in those countries. And despite what you may have been led to believe, and I may get in trouble for this, but America doesn't have a very good reputation in a lot of countries. So, I could walk into a place and get 5-star treatment, whereas somebody who writes a travel guide walks in, and the
Different,
difference is
different. Well,
stark.
I'll say this. Whenever I say I'm Jamaican, it's like the
Mhm.
red carpet is rolled out in a lot of places.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely.
You know.
Um, yeah, I'm just thinking a lot of stories like that, where
Well,
people know
interrupt the
that.
stream of thought. If one comes back to you where it said, when I said I'm Jamaican, this happens. I've heard some of the
Oh,
greatest stories. One young lady from Mexico said, when they tell her that when she told them in the restaurant she's Jamaican, she gets her food free, and her husband who's
uh,
Mexican had to pay for his food.
that's funny. All right. One day I took some of my guests from Saipan to Tinian, a little island just 10 minutes across the water. And because we were running late, I had to park in a reserved spot. So when we got back to Saipan from touring that, on Tinian, my car was booted. It had the locks on the car because I was illegally parked. The lock was preventing me from driving. So I had to go to the police desk, and I said, my car got booted, and he said, yeah, you were parked in a wrong spot. I said, yeah, I know. How much is the How much is the fine? And I thought it would be like $200, what it is in New York. And he said, oh, that'll be $25. And I'm thinking, maybe I'll just park here, as a normal thing. So anyway, we get in his little golf cart and we're driving to the car, and we start talking, and he said, where are you from? I say, oh, I'm from Jamaica. And he goes, oh, Bob Marley. And I go, yeah, and we talk about music, because I used to do a radio show in New York. We talked about, language, and he said, I always love Jamaica. So when we get to the car, he takes the boot off the car, and then he says to me, the police officer says to me, since you were so nice to me, I'm not going to give you a ticket. just don't let it happen again. So yes, I hear more reggae here, Xavier, than I did in Jamaica.
What?
Now, depending on when you grew up in Jamaica, you never heard reggae on Sundays.
Right.
In Jamaica, there was a time when you could not hear reggae on Sundays. You hear, classical music and stuff like that.
True. Yeah, your Sunday music, your Sunday matinee. Yeah, no reggae music on a Sunday. You're right.
I hear more reggae. I hear Bob Marley. I see posters. I see T-shirts. I hear more Bob on Steel Pulse, Aswad, Burning Spear on the radio than I did in Jamaica and in America as well.
Wow.
And there's a whole different scene. You know how you can listen to some music if you're familiar, and you can tell Jamaican reggae from UK reggae has a different feel. There's also Pacific Island reggae. And there are artists out of Fiji, out of Guam, out of Hawaii, and they're doing some great. I love this stuff. Real nice mellow feel to it. So there's a whole different world of reggae that I've been exposed to here. Just by living here. Really, really.
That is awesome. I'm going to switch up a little bit, and we're going to talk about food. What is the food like? And if there was one thing that you would say, Xavier, if you come to Saipan, you have to try this. I know there may be many things, but you're gonna, what would that one thing be? And tell us a little bit about the food.
Okay, so as you'll probably learn, none of my answers are really easy. There's always a backstory I have to tell. All right.
No, and you're ingrained in the culture. I mean, totally understand.
The backstory is I'm vegan, I'm vegetarian. So a lot of the stuff that the average food traveler might experiment with, I just don't eat. But I'll tell you this, Saipan is pretty much on the same latitude as Jamaica. So it's a tropical island. You can see in the background, the one, it's a tropical island. So Xavier, everything that you can get in Jamaica, breadfruit, soursop, nesberry, sweet sub,
mangoes,
everything that you can get in Jamaica, I can get here. I even found Jimbilin. Here on Saipan. But one thing, guess the one thing that you cannot get here on Saipan?
Guinep.
Huh?
Guinep.
Oh no, they have Guinep. They have Guinepas as well.
Okay. Aki.
Yeah. but I've heard that there was a Jamaican doctor who was here, and when he left a sapling, an Aki tree sapling with a local fellow. So I'm first on the list. When that tree starts to bear, I'll be the first on the list to get some Aki.
Have you seen the tree?
No, I haven't seen it.
Because you're talking about something existing, but you have to go inspect it.
Yes, absolutely, I will. I know the guy who.
And maybe even talk to him and talk to the tree. You may need to talk to the tree. Let the tree know you're Jamaican so that it say, hey, I'm going to have to bring some fruit.
That's a very good point. Like how they talk to babies when they're in the womb so that they can get familiar with the parents' voice. I need to talk to this tree so it knows that even though it doesn't feel like Jamaica, that there's still, a Jamaican obligation to.
But you're vegan, as you said. And is there a food that you have heard then that folks typically will say, this is something I really enjoyed there. What would you say that would be that you've
Yes.
heard?
That's something called kelaguen. So it's a chicken kelaguen, and it's a way they spice it. And again, I'm sorry, don't ask me how, but it's very popular. A lot of the restaurants, when they do have Chamorro restaurants here, people will go and ask for the fish kelaguen or the chicken kelaguen. So I'll send you a note on how to spell it later. But
All
that's
right.
something
No,
that's very
no
popular.
problem. That's good. So you as a vegan,
Mhm.
you don't eat fish either,
That is
obviously. Straight vegan. Have you had any, like challenges, or you're making your ital stew, you're making it, maybe you get your stash of canned ackee or canned callaloo or whatever,
right.
how are you navigating,
Well, when you think about it, even ackee, a lot of the foods that are typical in Jamaica are actually or can actually be vegetarian food, except of course, jerk pork and jerk chicken. But you can the ackee and saltfish. You can do the ackee without the saltfish. You do callaloo. You don't have to put the pork bits in in the callaloo. And they
Yes.
have callaloo growing here. The
Okay.
Filipinos the Filipinos call it culitis. I'm not sure what the Chamorros call it, but it grows here, and I buy it every week. There's a
And
vendor
how
at
do
the
they
local.
cook it? Do they cook it? How do they cook it there?
That's a very good question. I never really investigated that because I know how to cook it. so, so I can
Because
answer later.
if they're selling it, obviously somebody's there doing something with it. If they're selling it, or maybe they stack it for you. Maybe
Yes,
say
that's exactly what happens.
they know
A
you're
lot of
coming,
people,
and they say Walt's coming. This is Walt's stack.
right. You bring up an interesting point. Like you said, it's a small island. So you might think you're anonymous here, but people know. People know things about you that you don't even realize. When I first came to Saipan, I went to the farmer's market every Saturday. They call it Sabalo. Sabalo is a Chamorro word for Saturday. So Sabalo market. And, I'd see the fruits and I'd say, oh, I like this. And I bought Chico, which is a Nesberry. One of my favorite fruits is Nesberry. They call it Chico here. So I bought Chico. And I just go about my business. I buy my food. A couple of weeks later, I go back to the same market, and a guy I've never met before, one of the farmers, just comes up to me and says, "Hey, brother, the Chico you like is over there on that stand." Never met him before in my life. So people know you. They know your habits and your likes and your dislikes. And so on one hand, if you're not used to that, it can be a little off-putting until you get used to it. But there's no evil intent behind it. It's just that there's nothing else to do on a little island except talk about what the Jamaican guy, what the stranger, the stranger likes. So, but it's really cool.
So let me ask you this: is there a big well, there's obviously is there an airport there, or are you or all right, so
Yes,
you
yes. There is an airport, one airport, and we to travel between the islands. Like I mentioned, Saipan, Tinian, and Rota. The trip to Tinian is on a twin engine, single engine propeller plane. 5 people can sit in the plane, so you take 10 minutes and 39 seconds to
and
land
prayer,
and go.
10 minutes
Huh?
and prayer along the way.
10 minutes and 39 seconds. Now that's the
Wow.
engineer. That's the engineer in me, and because I write books, I time it. I time it from the minute it takes off to land, and it's usually about 10 minutes. So I tease my tour clients with that, and we have that. So anyway, but yeah, there's an airport, and then there's a commuter airline, one commuter airline, one movie theater, one hospital, post office here with no mail delivery. So there's no house delivery. There's no street names. There's no house numbers. So
There's
really,
wait. There's no how. So you basically say, Walt, if I'm on the other end of the island, you
mhm.
just take the straight road all the way, and Walt house is you go up on the hill side. That sound almost like like how the Jamaicans do it, and them say you go upon the hill, you take the corner, yeah, and then you see the man sit down right there. So and you sit and when you see the man sit down there, you make a direct right, and then you
Right,
go
right.
up the hill, and then when you come over two bump, it's so like
I'll
something
tell,
like
I'll tell you a story. A good friend of mine, what the fellow actually stayed with here on the island. He's a lawyer. He's been here from Oklahoma, and he came here in the late 70s, 79, and he's lived on here. He's a lawyer named Joe Hill, and he showed me a letter that was sent from someone in the mainland who knew he lived on Saipan, but they didn't know his address. So the letter was sent, Joe Hill, Saipan, and it got to him. This is a letter being sent from the mainland. Joe Hill,
wow.
and when it gets here, when it gets here, the guy at the post office is going to know, oh, that's for Joe Hill. So it's that sort of, it's like a small town in the middle of the Pacific. And
Wow.
it's been bad with that, but mostly good.
So let me ask you this, because being that you have given tours and everything, what would be the either, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an attraction, but if there's a place, a thing, an experience that you would recommend if I was to travel there? So Xavier, you must do this, or travel at this time of the year to come see this, the blossoms of it. Could be, what would you say, is an experience that you would recommend to anyone that's going to travel to Saipan?
Okay, so you mentioned some pretty good things. All right. Right now, it's kind of cloudy. And the day before it was actually sunny. We're just getting into typhoon season right now. So from July, August, September is probably not the best time to come. And I'm sure the tourism board may be unhappy with me for saying this. But if you want sunshine all the time, it's better to come in the spring and early summer. And you do get to see the flame trees, really spectacular orange and red blossom and some yellow flame tree. There's a flame tree festival that I think is either in February or March. And you also, right now since COVID, things have changed a bit, but there's also something we used to call the Thursday night street market. So if you only have a few days, make sure you're here on a Thursday night. Come early spring, March, April, May to get the best weather and the blossoms. And make sure you check out Forbidden Island. You gotta check out Forbidden Island, as I mentioned before, and you don't have to go on the island. Right. And if you're a World War II buff, then you need to check out Tinian. And again, let me just say this: a lot of people have heard of Hiroshima, the bomb that the U.S. dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those two planes, the Enola Gay and Boxcar, actually took off from the island of Tinian. So a lot of people don't know that. They'll hear about the bombing. They'll see the mushroom cloud. They know that the U.S. bombed Japan, two cities in Japan, but they may not know that the planes that the B-29 bombers actually took off from the island of Tinian, which is the sister island of Saipan. So a lot of my guests are actually World War II buffs who actually want to see the bomb pit, want to see the runway, want to see the old Japanese construction that still exists here on Saipan and on Tinian. So there's a lot of history, very, very pivotal history connected with Saipan and Tinian, and a lot of beauty, amazing beauty as well.
Wow. So cost of living as compared to probably the United States, or in general, what's the cost of living like?
For me, it's cheaper. I've heard some people say it's more expensive to live here, but for me, as a minimalist, as a vegan, I eat local food. I buy my food at the Saturday market. For me, it actually works out much cheaper. Rent here is much cheaper. An apartment, you can still get an apartment, one-bedroom apartment for $300 a month, $400 a month. What I'm paying for now, if I were paying for that in the States, I could easily be paying $1,200 a month for a one-bedroom apartment in New York City or more. And that's just real simple bare bones. Here, I can, pay my rent 400, 300, and there are places you can buy that are even cheaper. I don't use AC. I don't use air conditioning. I hear that's what pulls people's expenses up. But so for
Right.
me, it's much cheaper. There's no sales tax. There's no
Okay.
um, there's no property tax for people who actually can own property. As a non-Chamorro, I cannot own property here on Saipan. But for those
Mm.
who do, property tax, no sales tax. There's no um, um, parking meters on the street. So think about this for a second. I have friends who lived here who then go to the States to live. And one thing I prepare them for is I went to visit a friend once at Co-op City in the Bronx, and I had to sit in my car for close to 2 hours waiting for someone to pull out of a parking space to come down and go on their way so I could get a parking space to park. That's people can't believe it. People who live here can't even imagine what it's like to drive around the city in New York and actually not be able to stop your car and get out because everywhere has a monetary value attached to it. Everywhere has a parking
Right.
meter. You
Right.
park in front of a fire hydrant, run into the store and come out. There's a $160 ticket on your car. All of that stuff you don't have to deal with here. You just drive up, pull up on the sidewalk, pull up on the grass,
Back. And you
and just
go,
walk and just leave your car. So much easier lifestyle, than living in the
so,
States.
so I know you have written books. You have a blog. I know you do videos. Is there one link that you can provide to tell folks, hey, go check Walt's stuff out here? One link that you can just, and I think there's still you have written some stuff for Jamaicans.com, and I know they're still there. There are links there, but where can they find your brand? Where can they find your stuff?
All right. Well, because I have a lot of time on my hands, I actually have about 80 URLs, 80 websites, and 5 blogs and 4 YouTube channels. But I will.
So it sounds like Google you then. Just Google your name and they'll find you.
No, the best one I would say, okay, I'll give 2 if I may. One is JamaicanInChina.com. So
Okay. I know that one.
JamaicanInChina.com.
JamaicanInChina.com.
And I put all of my experiences traveling on Saipan as well as throughout Asia. And then the other one, if you want to know more about Saipan specifically, go to discoversaipan.com.
Okay.
Discoversaipan.com, and that is my tour guide website. So those 2 are the ones.
All right. All right.
I have a question for you, Xavier.
Yes.
And we didn't talk about this before, but you own Jamaicans.com.
Yes.
Now, my question to you is: were you the first to grab it back when back in the late '90s when a lot of us were getting online, or did you actually buy it from somebody?
No.
You were
First, one and only. We've been online 25 years plus, and and you had to give blood and your child back at that time to get a domain name, and you had to write it in. You had to write in. You had to fax stuff. Yes, you had to give drive light. You had it. Trust me, it wasn't an easy process. It took maybe about, I want to say, 6 months to get the domain name.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you remember what year that? The reason I ask is I found out about the internet in '97. So I reserved a bunch of domain names, and I own Niche Market, NICHE, niche. Some people say nichemarket.com. And that was in '97, and that was with Network Solutions.
Yes.
Was, the governing body. So I was paying $35 a year for that. And I actually owned bob-marley.com back then, but I also wasn't making any money. So at one point, I just couldn't afford it. I had to let it go. But when did you get Jamaicans.com? You remember what year that was?
Okay, I can't remember the exact year because we had a temporary website before that. Okay. But I have to go back. I was fortunate to work for a company that was into internet, started out with electronic marketing about 93, 94, before folks knew what the internet was. People would look at me crazy. When I used to talk about the internet, everyone thought I was crazy back then. And so
even '97, a lot of people were not, I was just learning about it. I had friends who knew about it. But 93, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, late 93, 94. And I don't want to date myself. People are going to say, oh, if old now. But, it was Prodigy, CompuServe, AOL.
All right.
Those were where we were at that point in time with that company. But that, thank God, I was fortunate and put in Jamaicans.com and got it. And to this day, we're still a thriving platform. But and this is a first. The questions turn on me. I like that. I love that.
That's cool. For those people, such nerdy things may not be impressive, but when you meet somebody who owns like Jamaicans.com or sex.com, that means they had to have gotten in really early.
Yes, early in the game. So I'm winding down, and first of all, listen, appreciate you spending the time and giving us just a little piece of what's there. Very interesting culture, very interesting information. And so I have two last questions. The first one is a scenario, and the last one is kind of getting into the culture there. So the first one is you land in Jamaica, you get off the plane. What is that first thing you're doing when you get to Jamaica?
All right. Okay. Again, there are no easy answers. So let me preface it by saying this. I watched one of your videos with the two young ladies who are in Sweden, and you had asked that same question. So I actually thought about this just in case you asked me. And the question you asked them was, what do you miss most about Jamaica? And what I miss most about Jamaica is the Jamaica that never was. And what I mean by that is I left Jamaica before, as I mentioned, before I actually went to high school. So all the friends who I remember, my good friend Andrew Walters and Norman Hemmings and Perez Cross, and then I remember all their names. I remember.
Wait, are we talking about the same Norman?
You know Judge Norman?
Judge Norman?
I don't know. I haven't been in touch with him in years, but Norman Hemmings used to go to Pembroke Hall Primary with me. Ask him.
I know a Norman Hemmings, so I'm gonna ask him if he knows you, because he's a judge. Right. He's a federal judge.
Wow. Where?
He's a federal judge based in Florida.
Wow. Okay, that could be it. Ask Norman, Andrew Walters, Perez Cross, Horace Hall. These are all guys I remember. So anyway, to answer your question, what I miss most was the Jamaica I never got to experience because I didn't get to go to high school with these guys and really develop. Our friendships had just started in elementary school. So what I miss most is just that feeling that I belong, that I
listen.
So once I get off the airport, once I get out of the airplane, the first place I'm going is just to go back to Pembroke Hall or go back to here and then and just pretend like I never left. But everything else, I can get everything else. I can get ackee in tins. I can get callaloo here. I mean, so all the food, is not an issue. If I was still eating meat, maybe I would go to Pete's Patties on Malines Road. But but for me, it's just that sense that I'm still here.
I get it. Let me ask you this question because I'm thinking about this now, and I know this is late in the game, but you mentioned the whole post office and whatever. Does Amazon ship there?
Yes, it does. And when I first moved here, and even up until today, there are a lot of companies who simply have never heard of Saipan, still to this day. I was trying to do a DNA test, and when I contacted Ancestry.com, they don't ship here. We're on the U.S. postal system. We're the same postal zone as Guam and Hawaii, but for whatever reason, you look on a lot of websites and you just can't find Saipan or Northern Mariana Islands. But Amazon is one of the companies that over the years, they've discovered that we're here. So yeah, a lot of shipments come in through Amazon. Stuff that you just can't get here.
Wow.
Stuff that they do ship here, absolutely. But not everyone.
Wow. Okay. All right. So final question.
Okay.
So, and if you've watched the videos, you know what's coming.
Mhm.
So you've been there long enough, and
Right.
I'm at the spot. Hopefully, you know how to say in one of the indigenous language how to say goodbye, and teach me how to say it and the audience in
Okay.
in one of the
Tomorrow.
indigenous language.
Right. Now, fortunately for me, I never want to be caught unprepared. So I actually emailed a Chamorro friend of mine yesterday just to make sure that I got it right. So as I mentioned, now this Chamorro was colonized by Spain for many, many years. So a lot of the language is very similar to Spanish. So um, esta, it would be like goodbye, sort of like how you say hasta mañana. So esta is how you casually say see you later to somebody.
All
And
right.
buenas, like you would say buenos dias, but in
Right.
Chamorro, buenas. Buenas to say hello, esta to say goodbye.
Well, Walt, listen, thank you. A welcome.
One more.
Go ahead.
Can I give a final thought?
Yes, yes,
All right.
by all means.
One of the things that my personal opinion is that a lot of people are afraid to travel. A lot of people are afraid to jump out, outside of their comfort zone. And when you think about it, it's all really silly. This whole concept that of borders and these arbitrary lines that people carve up, the planet on, and because you're born on this side of the line, you're this, and you're born on this side of this imaginary line, you're that, and we have all of this contention because people are too focused on the boundaries and the borders. It's actually starting to rain here. So what I want to encourage people to do is just step back for a second and realize that all of these borders, all of these lines are arbitrary. And just because you are born within one of these arbitrary lines doesn't mean that you're obligated to seek your bliss there. It just within this silly arbitrary thing called a border. So feel free to jump out on your own and see the world and seek your bliss in Saipan, in Kazakhstan, and wherever, if that's where you feel you're more aligned, more suited to. There's a quote that I got from a fellow named Harry Brown who said, "It takes far less effort to find and move to a society that has what you want than it is to try to change an existing society to match your standards."
Oh.
So on that basis, I encourage people just to go out, see the world, and I timed it well because I knew it was going to rain today, so it's starting to rain now. So
Blessings. It is blessings, my friend. That's what it is. So,
no problem.
Walt, is it Esta or S?
Esta.
Esta. Again, thank you for all the information, and blessings, my friend, and Esther.
Show some love now. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss a video.